Cache-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 299 of the GeoGearHeads. We're talking today about going from the smartphone to the GPSR. This is the second time we've talked about this one, though. Believe it or not, the last time was way back in August of 2012. That was when we still carried the beta tag, so it was beta episode 34. And we really haven't done it since then because I don't know how many of our users have actually been going from a smartphone or from the GPSR to the smartphone, because most of our users are now on, or audience is now on the smartphone. But I'm Daryl W4, and filling in for the we'll call him vacationing tonight. Chris of the Northwest is his partner in crime on the show that records right after this, Len Monkey.
Hey, thanks, Daryl. I was just going to comment that I'm really glad that you're not on beta shows anymore because I don't have a beta machine. I couldn't listen to them. So,
well, and that was the whole problem, is that no one had beta anymore.
yeah.
Even digital beta cam has fallen away. So, where were you going to find any Betamax, beta cam, or digital beta cam stuff? Period.
Exactly. Well, you know what? I am very thankful that you've invited me to come and join you tonight, and even more excited to, for the first time in my experience, meet our guest tonight.
Nice to meet you too.
And everyone's going to remember Jennifer of Team AJK as our puzzle expert. But last time she was on, she mentioned that she had been doing more caching with the smartphone now, and that's what triggered this show. So why don't you give us a brief description of what it was that made you move from the GPSR to a smartphone?
Well, it was actually really gradual for me. I way back had a one of those little yellow E-Trex, and didn't do very well with it because I would put the coordinates in wrong and all this. And so when I got my DeLorme PN60 and I could do paperless caching, I thought that was all I was ever going to want ever, because it was so amazing. I could load all this stuff in, and I was very, very happy with that. And I didn't even have any kind of even close to smartphone at that point. So I was just sure that that was all I was ever going to want. And I did get what I would call a semi-smart phone, where I could use Wi-Fi with it. And I did get app. I got the CGeo app for that, the Android one. And I liked it because I could load things into it and I could pull them up. And so I started trying to use maybe both at once. If I ever did a long trip, I would put things mostly in the GPSR. But if I was just doing a cache or two, I could use the semi-smartphone. So I sort of had both in tandem for quite a long time. And when I finally made the move to the fully smartphone, I guess it was a little over a year ago that I started. And I was still sort of doing both, but I started realizing that really I didn't need the GPSR. I guess I kind of had the same feeling that maybe a lot of people used to, that the smartphone GPS receivers weren't as accurate. And so I had always had my DeLorme as kind of a backup, thinking, well, if I can't find the cache with the phone, I'll put the DeLorme up and see. And I was starting to see that they were giving me the exact same results. And so I just gradually noticed that I wasn't even loading things into the DeLorme anymore. And this summer I took, I think 4 trips, did quite a bit of caching on all of them. And I did not even take the DeLorme at all. And I've been very, very happy just using the smartphone. I get, good reception with it. And I can pull up the satellite views and things like that I couldn't do, obviously, with the semi-smartphone. And I've just been very, very happy with it. And I was kind of sad in a way. I missed my little DeLorme, but just felt like I had kind of outgrown it and didn't really need it for what I've been doing.
So Jennifer, a question for you. One of the most common pieces of feedback that people give when it's the comparison of GPS cache or GPSR caching versus smartphone caching is battery life, and that I got way better battery life on my GPSR than on my smartphone. How do you feel about that, and how do you deal with the situation?
I'm probably not the kind of person that caches like all day. You know, um, I never had any issues, honestly, with battery life with my phone and with my GPSR. Really, I use the lithium batteries in the GPSR, and I could go. I never really had battery. I always carried spare batteries, and I guess when I was doing most of the caching I was doing lately, I either had access to one of those little charger things that you could just plug in if I need it, or I was in a car and I could plug it in or whatever. So for me, I didn't really experience that, but I don't know if maybe the phones have been getting better in terms of the batteries or what. I don't know. What have you guys seen in that regard?
Well, we do want to talk about the battery stuff, but before we get off of the reasons that we switch, I wanted to read a couple of things in the chat room here.
Mhm.
Tech Magnet says that in March, he just made the switch from GPSR to iPhone with Cachly, but Team Maviju said he was using both, but pretty much stopped using the GPSR when he got essentially fed up with the clumsy method of transferring the data between them. So there's a couple of reasons from some of the GeoGearHeads as to why they stopped caching with the GPSR primarily. And tonight, we want to talk about, both and what's good and bad about them. I carry my GPS a lot of the time, but I just never seem to use it. Now, Jay, as I understand it, you're actually doing mostly the GPSR still.
Absolutely. You will pry my eTrex 30X from my cold dead hands. I am a hardcore GPSR user, but that said, I do use the smartphone. And actually, it was interesting, Jennifer, listening to what you were saying, particularly when you were talking about going on trips. We actually use our Android tablet with CGeo on it extensively when we're doing a hashtag geocache road trip. And find that it's really great for a navigational tool. So my co-pilot, she's got that up and is mapping out against our pocket queries of where we're gonna head next. But then once we hop out of the truck and there's a 2K hike through the bush, it's the GPSR. The phone goes away. The phone gets pulled out if I see a really nice view and I want to take a photo, or if we're at ground zero, really stuck and we need to try and look at some old logs that, I can only go back 5 logs on my GPSR.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, the only other time I'll use the GPSR is if I'm doing sort of impromptu urban caching. But once I'm on a trail, the phone goes away. I don't know. Maybe it's I don't trust myself with a phone while I'm hiking. But I just, definitely default to the GPSR and the phone as a backup unit.
Mm-hmm.
A couple more interesting comments. Tick Magnet said that his Garmin Montana is more accurate than his iPhone in the big trees. And real quick on that one of the reasons I'd like the smartphone better is when I'm caching in urban areas. It tends to be more accurate because it can use the Wi-Fi to help filter out the refractions. So you're going to be a little bit more stable and better accuracy in especially like a city with tall buildings.
Yeah.
On the smartphone.
I was going to say, I think Tick Magnet's out caching the kind of areas I'm caching in.
Yeah.
So.
But if you're going out into, like a trail with trees, you want the GPS with that good antenna because that's going to make a big difference for you.
Yep.
I would totally believe that.
Especially if you're out away from the cell towers, your phone is going to take a lot longer usually to acquire a signal if you're not keeping the screen on and the GPS at high accuracy. Mm-hmm. So you're going to chew through more battery. You're going to be a little less accurate for a while as well. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the tricks that people have learned using GPSR or using the smartphones is you tend to turn off the screen when you're not using it to conserve the battery. And so it doesn't get as hot but when you're turning off the screen, most of the time the apps are shutting down the GPS. So when you turn it back on, it has to reacquire. And this is one of the big ways that smartphones got such a bad reputation for having inaccurate coordinates on placements. Because what happened with a lot of people would just fire up, if you're in like the Maps app, that's not using the high accuracy either. It just needs to know roughly where you are because it's trying to map on roads, not tell you where this cache is. So if you're using like the Maps app, it's not in the high accuracy. If you're just firing it up and going, it's not getting a good location. You have to wait for it to lock and get a better location than what it's getting from the cell towers and the initial GPS. So if you don't leave it on long enough, and I don't think either one of you were really in with the old like Magellan units and the pre-E-Trex where it was really, really bad and you'd have to let the GPS sit for like 10 minutes before you could get a good reading.
No,
Nope.
I'm a relatively new cacher as well.
Okay. But it reminds me so much of that situation. By the time the 60 CSX came out, I was just so happy because now I had a GPS that I could turn it on, and within a minute or two, I knew where I was and I could go. It was just like, the heavens opened up and rays of sunshine coming down. Yeah, and it was almost always like right on. No more drunken bee dance. You didn't have to wait for the Magellans were known for the boomerang, where you'd go stop, it would continue to walk, and then bring you back. And in many cases, you had to go and stop ahead, like 30 feet ahead of where you thought the cache was going to be. Wait for it to catch back up to where you were. And like the early E-Trex had the opposite problem, where you had to stop after where it said the cache was, and then it would catch up to you.
Yeah.
So,
on that note, I had an interesting experience last weekend. We did. We took my sister-in-law out to go do a little bit of urban caching, and at the tail end of it, we're going to grab a puzzle that Mrs. Land Monkey and I had found years ago when we first started caching, but our co-cacher had not found yet. So we were using the phone, and I have a number of different caching apps installed on the phone, on the Android phone, just because like test out different ones and be a geocaching podcaster who actually geocaches. And initially, I was using what was I using? I was using the official app, the GeoCachinger app, and I'm like, okay, I know approximately where I should be going, but this has me off. Like the ground zero is not right. Like, and it was about 15 to 18 meters off. I'm thinking this is weird. So, I thought, okay, maybe it needs to settle for a bit. I'm walking back and forth, letting it try and settle. And it was very, very consistently about 15 meters off. So I thought, okay, let's try CGeo and see what happens. So flip over to the other app, and it gets me within 2 meters of ground zero. And like I said, I knew kind of where I was going. So I thought, wow, that's a significant difference. So Daryl, the thought that came to my mind was, is there actually, I'm not a programming expert, put my flag up right now, but do the different apps utilize the GPS firmware in different ways?
there's different ways that the programmers can call the GPS. The different platforms in different versions of the OSs, in fact, have changed the way that works. But generally, on iOS, there were 3 different levels of accuracy, and on Android, there were 2. As I understand it now, Android has a lot more steps that you can utilize, so you can kind of feather what it is. And on iOS, I've seen a number of the apps that will have like 5 different levels now. So I don't know exactly how many decision points there are in there. But yes, you can request different levels of accuracy. And if you're calling the API, you can usually save some battery power by using the same location as the other apps are using. So it's only doing one call for the location. So yeah, there's a bunch of that kind of stuff that factors into it. And some of the old apps will use the GPS differently and get better or worse location information. I'm thinking CGO probably, since it's open source and an older app, is probably trying to talk to the GPS more directly too. But yeah, we've heard a lot of people complain about the accuracy on the geocacher app. And I'm pretty sure, though I haven't gotten any confirmation, that they're not using that high accuracy, because a high accuracy mode really kills your battery.
Right.
So in order to not kill your battery, they back off on the accuracy a little bit.
So that's a choice that the programmers are making, not a choice that the user would make when you're pulling up your app.
Sometimes the apps will give you the option.
Okay.
What was it called? Looking for Cache, I remember, had an option where you could pick the 3 different levels in the settings. And as I recall, it actually had options for when you're on the map screen, when you're on the list screen, and I think it even had when it was backgrounded. So you could pick, okay, if I'm on the list screen, I don't need a good accuracy because I'm not hunting the cache right now. So save some battery power. Most of the programmers now are making those kind of decisions themselves and just trying to come up with a good experience. Because if you're not in a navigation screen, just switch to the lower power mode, like one step down, and you'll save a ton of battery for just that little bit of time. So it's a trade-off that they're trying to balance themselves in the development. Ben in the chat, though, had an interesting comment too that we have to mention. He says that the smartphone looks much more normal, quote, in urban areas. It blends in. Folks aren't walking around zombie field on their GPSRs much these days.
Oh, zombified, right? Yeah.
Zombified, yeah, sorry.
Head down looking at this foreign looking device. Somebody walks by. Well, that's not a smartphone. What is that person up to? And that's
when you got the thing around your neck, and
the language.
Yep.
I say that's when you need to have your reflective vest and your clipboard at the same time, though.
Yeah. Well, how many people do you know who still do that? With things like Pokemon Go, people aren't looking twice at the smartphone people playing around. But even before that, everyone is texting on their phones in the cities.
Yeah, nobody's looking up.
So it's just normal. Yeah. So it's better camo. And back in the day, you used to use your smartphone or your GPSR and hold it up like it's a phone. Trying to talk on it is camo. Of course, if anyone looks at it, they're like, that's not a phone, especially now. Who has a phone that's that huge? There is no phone currently available that is large enough to house 2 AA batteries.
I have special phone for you.
Oh, okay. I misspoke. I remember there's 2 different phones now. One is the spare one that actually runs on lithium AA batteries.
Nice.
It's an emergency phone. And then there was another phone. I can't remember who it was from, but it's a giant phone that's kind of trying to replicate the old candy bar phones for the people who don't like the new phones. The new thinner phones. And they're doing pretty well with that one, as I understand it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
My first cell phone was about the size of a brick, and my kids just can't believe that was actually really cool technology.
It's a 30 centimeter long rubber antenna on the top, and good stuff.
Nice.
That would have been tricky to cache with.
No. That would not.
All right. Well, let's get back to talking about the GPSR versus smartphone kind of thing again. And the way that I ended up going to smartphone is probably different from most, because I had so many GPSRs and I was always testing stuff once I started doing the shows. But before I even started doing the shows, my typical caching mode was I'd have the GPS, and I eventually settled on the Palm platform with CacheMate. And all of my logging has always been with something like that. I've never done just the GPSR, but eventually we got like the Colorado 300, which was supposed to do it all in the one unit. I tried it. Didn't work so well. And at that point, I think I had picked up the iPod Touch and was starting to play with some of the apps on there, but I was still doing the dual screen thing. So I'm very used to doing the dual screens. And that was kind of always my intent, was I was going to use the GPSR as my primary caching device and do all of my logging and lookups and that kind of stuff on the PDA / now smartphone. One, the screens are so much better to read on the PDAs and smartphones than on a GPSR, especially going back that far. So you could enter in the text easier. Everything was just easier, but it doesn't have the battery life, and the accuracy wasn't as good on those early ones. Well, especially most of the early ones that I used didn't even have a GPSR. So there was no GPS in the smartphones. Mm-hmm. So that's where I came from, was trying to do the dual screen. And what I eventually realized is I'm going out, finding a lot of the caches without even having the GPSR with me. And when I do have the GPSR with me, it's hanging around my neck all the time. I never pick it up. Like sometimes I'll pick it up, I'll route to the cache. 3 caches later, I realize I've never touched it. It's still sitting there around my neck. So it was one of those gradual moves for me. And it's really just a convenience thing, having it all in the one device, which is the smartphone. You have the instant access if you have the data plan. Even if you don't have the data plan, it's, go up to your caching app, cache all of the geocaches you want to do for the day, whether it be from a pocket query or manually, and you just go. It's, no cables to hook up to a computer. You just download it and go. I was really hoping for a lot of that with the Oregon 650, and it just isn't working for me. So I still take my eTrex 30. That's my favorite unit. And that's what I tend to do when I go caching for a longer day, is take that. But most of the time, it's just the smartphone. Now, Landmark, you were asking about the battery. Typically, I run with a battery case on the iPhone. One of the nice things is if you have one of the more common phones, you can get these battery cases. And I like those. Originally I was, built-in batteries stink. This is terrible. I've grown to love them because I never have to power down the phone. Mm-hmm. If you have that battery that's interchangeable, you have to power it down, wait for it to come back up, which is just a problem. If you have the external battery pack, you just swap it out when it gets low, and I'll typically carry 2 of them. If I'm just going caching, one battery case lasts me 90% of the time the whole day. The problem is I'm never going just caching. So if you're playing Pokemon Go, you'll kill, like the iPhone 7, I've killed the battery case within about 90 minutes.
Right. So Daryl, you brought up actually another interesting point, and that's, for those like myself who cache almost exclusively by GPSR, part of that is because I don't play any other games. But Jennifer, do you play any of the other geolocation games?
I don't play any of the other games, no. But I was thinking, as you were talking about the logging aspect, and that's one thing that I actually have not figured out how to do. I haven't really spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, but doing like field notes on the CGO, I haven't really figured out how to do that and how to upload those so that I could then log everything sort of.
The draft mode is what it's called now on geocaching.com. It is still called field notes on a lot of the apps. I used to love that on the Lorm, because I would have everything, and it would, when I uploaded, it was all in order, and so I didn't have to worry about keeping track of what order I did things in, and I could just, I never log in the field. I always like to write a lot, and I end up doing it on my computer because I want to type a whole bunch and tell all kinds of stories and stuff. So but having that field note text file out is really handy, because you can bring that into something like GSAC and run it through and do a bunch of the macros and get everything just the way you want from some shortcuts.
Mhm.
But a lot of the apps will do most of that internal now. So you can do, I'd say probably about 90% of what people are looking for from the CGO logging right in the app, save it as the draft or post it immediately. So really, I think what we're seeing with that part of it is that people are getting away from the computer because we've got these really powerful computers in our hands.
Right.
Why are we going back to this big clunky thing that, for most of us is probably at least 3 years old and trying to do it there? It's because we like the keyboard because it's easier to work with. But, we are seeing the shift. And Land Monkey, you were talking about using the tablet in the car for navigation.
Yeah.
One of the things that really got me excited about tablets, even before we got like usable tablets, do you remember the OQO by any chance?
No.
Little Windows 95, I think, based computer that was probably a smaller screen than your standard like iPhone
Wow.
screen was.
Hmm.
Little Celeron computer, probably about 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick, but it was a full Windows computer in this little box. And we were so excited about that, trying to use that to do some logging on like power runs. Just never really worked. But the concept that we've always had is one person is responsible for all the logging. And, for a long time, people would actually take the laptops. There's someone sitting in the back seat who never gets to get out of the car, who's doing all of the logging, and then they send the text file to everyone, that field notes text file. So the smartphones and the tablets have really made that possible now, especially because we have so many more apps.
Yeah.
There's a choice of good apps for both platforms. So whichever platform you're on, you're probably going to find something that you like well enough that does do the export of the text file. And the reason that you want the text file for the caching in groups like that is so that you can send that text file to everyone else. Then they can upload it and do their logging from that one text file.
Yeah. Then you remember who found which cache and if there was something unique about that cache, etc.
Sure.
One of the things, again, it just comes down to how you do things and how you learn to work around it. And by primarily caching by GPSR, I've developed, Mrs. Monkey and I have developed our own effectively shorthand. So we'll enter in very simple codes, 1-2 letter codes as field notes in the GPSR in the eTrex 30 as per cache as we're logging it live on in the field there. Which then we export into GSAC later as our logging tool, and then we'll know, okay, yeah, this meant so and so found it. This meant that it needs maintenance, or that the log was wet, or whatever else. And then you kind of remember those. Sometimes it's just even having the little mnemonic that goes, oh yeah, because you have a day like a couple of weekends ago when I was with some friends. We went down to Whidbey Island, and in 2 days we did about 110 caches by bike and foot, and you don't remember number 37. So, yeah. So you find ways to work with it, but I definitely would not argue at all that using the macros and the logging templates in CGO, geocaching.com, the geocaching app, and what have you, make life significantly simpler. And I think, Daryl, I'm not a Cachly user because I'm not on the Apple platform, or the iOS platform, but I understand that there's been some real advances in Cachly for being able to log.
Yeah, they've made some huge advances with the software. Nick has made some huge advances with the software since the last version even that came out. So my big thing was I want to do a batch upload, and they didn't have that in Cachly. Now it has that. So that was like the last piece before I could really get rid of Geosphere, which as of Tuesday is no longer supported because it's not 64-bit, and iOS 11 requires 64-bit code. So the caching app that was my mainstay for years is no longer available. And this is one of the problems that you'll have to deal with on a smartphone. Upgrades to your OS will break software. and various updates to the software will not work on your phone. So keep that in mind. Always be cautious when you're doing any kind of updates. It can break.
So Jennifer, I think I picked up that you're using an Android.
Yes.
Okay. And the app you're using is CGO, or are you using a different one?
CGO is the only one I've experienced with. I have some friends that have used the geocaching app, and
Pause.
well,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's what it is. Anytime anything changes, people are gonna fuss and moan about it for a while. So I haven't checked in with them to see how much, how they're feeling about it now after having a chance to, use it for a while in its new form. But
the one thing I will say on the GeoCachinger app is, regardless of which platform you have, install the GeoCachinger app for just the messenger. The internal messaging. That's the only way you can get the notifications and everything. And I've used that many, many times to talk with other cachers. You ping someone, as long as they have the app installed, they're getting that push notification. Or, well, I shouldn't say that. If they have the push notifications enabled for the app that they have installed, then they'll get the notifications. So it's a better way to get a hold of the cache owners that you might not have contact info for.
Yeah.
I used my smartphone just getting into the geocaching website and hitting the button and sending a message and getting it back through my email. I did that several times actually while traveling, which was quite nice. I never really expect that somebody's going to reply instantly, but it sure is nice when they do.
Yeah, but the rate of prompt replies seems to be much greater with the Messenger app, and especially because the Messenger in geocaching.com, because if they have the app installed, they're getting it right away. And I've had at least twice now that I haven't been far enough away from a cache that I thought had gone missing before I could go back and check on it. But it also allows you to send the photos, and the contact form on the geocaching site didn't allow you to send the photos. So I've actually gone and sent photos of, is this where it was? Because you'll find like the little brass hook in a tree or in the pole or whatever. And it's like, there's nothing on this. I looked around. I didn't see anything. Is that where it was supposed to be?
Yeah.
Daryl, you're not going to find a little brass hook in a tree. That's illegal. No one's going to do that.
I know. Yeah. If only people actually followed all the rules. In any case, yeah.
Remember Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah. But yeah, it's been a whole different experience now when you can get that prompt reply from the cache owner. And I'll go and search now for multis and stuff that look like they've had issues because of a couple of DNFs. If I run into a problem, I can send the CO a message and usually get a pretty quick answer.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen, but it happens enough, and I can always send the photos with it, and eventually I'll get an answer back that says, no, you buggered that one up. Go back and try it again.
Well, case in point, I had experience just like that where, again, glad I had the phone, even though I wasn't primarily caching by it, but we were on the Utah Geo Tour, and one of the counties is almost exclusively puzzle caches, field puzzle caches. And some of them are pretty cool and unique, but one of them, when we got to it, we just could not figure out how to get the combination out of the field puzzle to open the locks. And we're like, when we got to it, it was in pieces, as it were. Like the various pieces that need to be assembled were all taken apart and in weird spots. So we thought, this looks hinky to start with. So we kind of reassembled what we thought it should look like, and we're trying to get it to work, and just nothing, right? And then we're finding more pieces of it lying in the grass around. Thought, yeah, this isn't right. So was able to use the the GeoCachinger app because of the built-in messaging. Was able to send a message to the CO right away to say, this is what I'm finding. And then, I didn't, but I could have sent him a picture of the state of the thing. I thought, I'm thinking about that now as you're saying, that would be even more helpful. But he was able to get back to me almost immediately and say, yeah, you're not going to get into that. So, and he was able to honestly say, like, I can't get to it till tomorrow. So, but at least I knew. So I knew right away, okay, this is, this has been muggled, and B, gonna have to move on and find a different one. So, it saved a lot of time.
Well, and honestly, that is one of the biggest things, is knowing that it's not something that you messed up on. It's time to go.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll just get into this, I have to fix it. I have to solve this puzzle.
Yeah.
And I know people who will do that. They'll sit there looking for a cache that they're pretty sure isn't there for like the next 4 hours, just to make sure they can't find anything, because they really don't want to leave the cache unfound if there's any chance it's still there.
4 hours. That's pretty committed. 4 hours.
Yes.
Half an hour is the max I've ever done.
I was going to say, yeah.
Two I know who have done that.
Wow.
Usually that's the, those multi-caches that they're doing that on, or the puzzle caches that, are out of state or hours away that they don't want to give up on. Because you're going to have to drive back 4 hours anyway. I'll give it the 4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So getting back to the battery issue, because that is one of the more important issues. If you are making the move from the smartphone to the GPSR, there's a couple of things that you generally want to do to conserve battery power on the unit. One, like we mentioned, turn off the screen if you're not looking at it. You do have some latency when it comes back on. You have to unlock it, that kind of stuff. Fine. But if you're just walking down the trail, turn it off. That's going to save a ton of power. The other thing is, unless you're in a city or some kind of suburban area, turn off the Wi-Fi, and if you can, turn off the Bluetooth. Both of those things will save you a bunch more battery power. The reason, though, that you don't want to turn off the Wi-Fi in the city is that actually gives you better location, because it's looking for access points, the Wi-Fi hotspots around you, to help stabilize and get a good quick read on where you are. And that information has gotten really good. There's a number of people I've talked with who actually play some of the location-based games, including geocaching, strictly off iPad, or not iPads. Well, you could do it off the iPad. Because one of the interesting things, if people don't remember, is unless you have the cellular chip on your iPad, you don't have a GPS. It's all one chip that gives you the cellular connection and the GPS. So if you get the Wi-Fi only ones, you don't have a GPS. If you're tethered to an iPhone, it uses the iPhone's GPS. But if you're just walking around town, there's no GPS on those Wi-Fi ones. Same thing with the iPod Touch. So you can walk around in a more urban setting, like a major city, and people have actually had almost as good accuracy with just that as you would with a GPSR or a smartphone, because that database of access points has gotten so good that they can triangulate their location just off of those.
Wow. It's pretty impressive.
It is very impressive. And for a while, there was a lot of talk of, do we even really need anything else? And there was a lot of experimentation with using Wi-Fi access points as essentially stationary beacons. They've discovered that doesn't work as well as you really need, and hence the like iBeacon technology has come about, and they're putting those in malls and in conference centers so that you get a better idea of where you are, because those give you a much better indication. And if the software supports it, which is usually built into the OS, you can actually walk around indoors and get a very good location, certainly better than you get off your GPS outdoors in the cities.
Right on. Well, there's not too many geocaches in malls or conference centers, so.
Well, I don't think there's any geocaches in malls or conference centers unless they were placed before the guidelines were updated in 2005.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well,
and there had been one in the Mall of America, actually. That one's gone because the store is gone. as I understand it. But that was actually, I think, a letterbox, not a traditional or multi-cache.
Which makes total sense because that would be very much not very, but much easier to do as a letterbox.
Mhm.
But think about it, if you have something like the Mall of America, wouldn't it be appropriate to have at least 1 or 2 geocaches in there?
That's a
It's
I've been there
supposed to be
once.
an
It's
indoor city.
yeah.
You know, I totally get why there's not, but there should be.
Well, and talking about battery life on the cell phones and different use cases, as a vlogger myself as well, one of the things that I do find is that I am eating up a lot of battery on the phone while I'm out on the trails because I'm also doing a lot of photos of different spots, and um, I'm managing um, my video camera through the phone. Um, so using the GoPro, it uses an exclusive Wi-Fi connection with your phone, and that can eat up the battery as well. So I carry a 20K milliamp hour external battery for my phone, and a nice long monoprice cable that has just been unbelievably reliable. So that
Absolutely.
rig works.
Yeah, you would definitely want some kind of extra power. Even when you have the external battery packs, I always like having. I keep. I think it's a 8,000 or maybe even 10,000 milliamp hour battery in the car. So I always have that available if something goes wrong. But when I'm caching, I usually take a couple of others, or when I'm going out to play Ingress or whatever. I think I've told the story on here a few times of having that. Can't remember what the name of it was, but it was one of the backpacks early on before the 10 and 20,000 milliamp hour batteries were common. I had a backpack with 20,000 milliamp hour battery. I'd throw another like 15,000 milliamp hour battery in there, along with a couple of other smaller ones. And we would go play Ingress in the early days of Ingress with really long cables coming out of the backpack. And I had like 2 or 3 people sometimes tethered to my backpack because I had the big long cables with the big heavy duty battery. At this point, those batteries have gotten so incredibly small. I have a 6,000 milliamp hour battery that's just small, tiny, compact, and fits into my pocket nice and easy.
Yeah.
So it's gotten much better for hauling these things around.
Yeah. In fact, I tried an interesting use case that worked really well on our last Utah road trip, where I have a solar panel, a fold up solar panel that fits nice and neatly on my dash. And while I was out caching, I had one of my spare batteries, external battery packs, out of the sun in the shady part of the car, but with a nice long cable going down to it, getting a trickle charge and topping up while I'm out doing a trail. And so I would always be charging batteries up. And, while you're driving, of course, you can just charge off the vehicle. But, it was, again, another monoprice purchase. But that 3-panel solar panel they have, that works like a charm.
Yeah, I have a backpack that I picked up off Amazon on one of those kind of deals that came with a 10,000 milliamp hour battery. Maybe it was 11, but somewhere in that range. Has a little solar cell that clips to the back of the backpack, and it had the water bladder.
Oh, nice.
So for like 40, 50 bucks, I got this complete kit that is really nice. I like hauling that thing around when I'm actually like out on the trail because it gives you a lot of space. But that's another good tip is if you're getting into any of these other electronics, cameras included, check out some of those backpacks that have the solar panels or at least the cable management at the very least for the batteries and the cables, because it's much easier to put the battery in your backpack than it is in your pocket. And the batteries lose efficiency as they get too warm or too cold. So if they're in your pocket, you will lose some efficiency. And sometimes if you take that battery, put it back in the backpack, it will cool down and you'll get a little bit more temperature out of, or a little more time out of it. But I'm always a little worried after so many of these lithium ion batteries have gone poof that I really try not to stick batteries in my pocket. I don't want to take the risk of shrapnel, and yeah, I'd make sure I'm getting good quality batteries.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the key, isn't it? Yeah.
It doesn't take much, no one who had the Note 7 had any expectation that battery was going to go poof, especially as early as they did.
Yeah. Fair
Or
point.
that was the Note 7, right? Not the Note 6?
It was the 7.
I'm getting confused.
7.
Okay, yes. And I'm not picking on the Note, just to be clear. I'm just using that as a good high profile example. One of the yeah, well, but there was a whole lot of the bad batteries. There was a woman in China who won a lawsuit against Apple because her iPhone battery exploded because she was charging in the bathroom with a third-party charger that basically fried the phone, and the battery exploded. It
sounds like a bad scene.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to get things out of balance, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We're pretty fortunate in the US that we have good enough quality control and demands on quality. But when you're starting to buy some of these products from China off of eBay, off of it's Alibaba, but what's the name of the portal site that they use to ship to the US?
Oh,
yeah, I can't remember. But people are getting all this stuff off of places like Wish that are coming directly from China, and there's not the quality controls, and you have to watch because most of this stuff that comes from those, it says that it's from like the likes of Sony. It's not. It's a knockoff. Sometimes they're even done in the same plant, but it's not using the same supplies. I've had a couple of times that I got stung by those looking for camera batteries on the Sony cameras.
It's Sony with an E.
No, it was Sony. It actually had the same stamp, but you could tell because it was a little bit fuzzy. They took the die and made a copy of the die. Yes, the joys of sourcing in China. We could go into many stories on that. Another thing, though, on the battery power with a smartphone, if you are out of cell tower range, go into airplane mode. You can always turn back on the Wi-Fi if you're going to be talking with something like that camera, and turn back on the Bluetooth if you're talking with a headset or with the, because I most of the time, if I'm not caching with someone, I have my headphones on and I'm listening to podcasts. So, I have to have my Bluetooth on. Takes a lot of extra battery power, but it's worth it so I can catch up on my podcasts or audiobooks or whatever. So, you can turn that stuff back on after you've gone into airplane mode. But the big thing is by turning off the airplane mode, the cellular radios shut down and they're going to stop searching. If they're searching for a signal, you will be so floored at how quickly that battery disappears.
Yeah, and the
the battery is actually like running out the charge port. You can watch it like trickle away.
The GPSR actually does stay on when you're in airplane mode, at least on the Samsung devices I've found.
It does on almost all of the devices, but that's a good point. In some of the earlier devices, they were shutting down the GPSR because there were some questions at one point about whether that was going to be permitted by not just the FAA, but there were what's the one for Great Britain and France, I think, was also locking that down for a while. After 9/11, they didn't want anyone to have GPS on a plane. So they were prohibiting it, claiming it interfered. Yeah, right. If your GPS, which is a received device, is interfering with the navigation of the plane, get off the plane, ground the plane.
Problems.
Yes. Replace all the avionics, and then we'll talk about flying again. All right, you know what, guys? We've been going for like 50 minutes though.
Wow.
And we've talked a lot about like the batteries and why we've done our smartphone caching, but that's about it.
So I have one last question for Jennifer then from me. So Jennifer, do you think you'll kind of stay with the route you're going and primarily using the smartphone? Do you see a case where maybe I should pull out the GPSR?
I think, listening to you talk about, especially your hiking experiences, I haven't done as much hiking lately. So I bet if I were going to do some caching where I might have more hiking or longer hikes than I've been doing, that I should probably go ahead and take the old GPSR with me, and just have it as a backup. And again, if I ran into battery issues or whatever, can't hurt to have the spare along. And I can see that's kind of a different scenario than the kind of caching I've been doing lately. So having both, I probably wouldn't go back exclusively, to the GPSR, but I can see where I could have both, that could still be a thing to do.
Well, I will recommend that if you're making that move intentionally or accidentally, like I did, keep using the GPS. If nothing else, it's a good way to mark your car. I like to leave the breadcrumb trails on and just have it on, because if something happens and I get completely turned around and destroy my phone accidentally, which granted, I've never had this problem, but it does happen.
Oh, yeah.
If you drop your phone in the water and it's not a waterproof phone, it will die. If you drop your phone on a rock, it's going to die. If you do both, just run. But in any case, keep that GPS with you. I do not recommend using rechargeable batteries, though, because they do lose the charge as you leave them in there. And if you're like me, you tend to stop changing out the batteries every time you take it because it's no longer your primary device.
Yeah, I don't use rechargeable ones. So
I love rechargeable batteries. The NIM batteries are so much better than using alkalines. What I do recommend, though, is invest in the lithium batteries because they have a shelf life of 10 years. And what I found is typically in a Garmin unit, I get at least 50% more battery life than I do out of a NIM. So it's a lot longer life than an alkaline. It's lighter too, which kind of just floored me. Not that it's that much weight. It's a pair of batteries. But having that spare set of batteries with you, that weighs a little bit less. The GPS weighs a little less, and they last for 10 years if you're not using them.
Yep.
Well,
yeah, I love those lithium batteries. They're amazing.
Batteries, but I mean, for myself, I actually go the other way, Daryl. I use 4 sets of rechargeable NIMs and rotate through them. Always have 2 that have a charge on them with me.
But you're good about charging those.
Oh yeah, constantly.
Yeah. See, and that's my problem is that when I stopped using the GPS on a regular basis, I stopped charging too.
Right. So I've got like a total workflow that goes on though. So because I'm always
right. Yeah. And it's as long as you can keep that up. And the other thing is when my cameras used to use AA batteries, I was charging those on a regular basis. I had a regular procedure every, couple of weeks. I'd go through and cycle through all the batteries. And it's just, my cameras don't use them anymore. My GPS uses them, but I never use my GPS. So remote controls are about the only thing I have anymore that use, and flashlights too.
Yeah.
We'll use the AA batteries. So, if you're good about recharging your batteries, absolutely keep using them. But if you're not good about it, I would recommend the lithiums. And I will also say you should, if you're carrying a GPS that takes AA's, we should say if you have one of the GPSs that doesn't take AA's, there's no point. But if you are carrying a GPS that takes AA batteries, keep a pair of the batteries, the lithium batteries in your backpack as spares. Carry, your rechargeables and everything else with you so you have that. But that way, in an emergency, you always have a pair of batteries that's going to work because it's that 10-year lifespan. And, 10 years in the backpack, never use them unless you have to, and you're good. And I mentioned that Smart One phone a long time ago now, probably 20, 30 minutes ago. That's what that is powered by. And it's for that very reason. It's supposed to be a little phone. I don't think it has any display on the thing, but it's supposed to go in your emergency kit with the lithium batteries. Worst case scenario, you pop it open. In the US, Canada, and most of the European countries now, you have to have emergency services even without the SIM card So it's always, as long as you have a cell signal, it's always going to get you emergency services.
Yeah.
So, little tip, lithiums are great as emergencies, if nothing else. But yeah, I just always use them because I never really use it. And my Oregon 650 has the same lithium batteries that have been in there pretty much since I bought the thing. I went and used it heavily when I first got it, killed the batteries to get a good feel for what it was like, put in the next set, and I haven't really used it that much. So, 7-8 months of not really using it doesn't count for that much. But with the eTrex 30, I think I get about 3 days on a set of lithiums.
There you go. Yeah, it's it depends how long the hike is, but we usually get about 2 days on our NIMS. And that's, 2 days for us of caching, a weekend of caching, especially if we're on a hashtag geocache road trip is, that thing's on 12 hours. So.
Yeah. Well, and the other tip is even with the GPSRs, plug those too into the car when you're driving.
Right.
Why drain batteries?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Quick one from cachers. They said, I fell in a pool at the bottom of a waterfall. My Magellan died, and my Note 4 kept right on ticking.
Oh
my goodness.
I've heard and seen that. And when I was like 11, I think it was, I did a similar problem with my entire SLR camera kit.
Oh, that seems expensive.
Yes. The camera itself, it was an early autofocus SLR body. Got some fairly minor damage considering it was an electronic device. One lens, the lens from the manufacturer of the camera, didn't do too badly. It just needed to be taken apart, cleaned, and oiled. The non-manufacturer lens, the coatings actually washed off this thing. And it's a big name manufacturer who I know has improved quality dramatically since then, so I'm not going to name them. But it was just a disaster. I mean, you look in and there's like no coatings. You can see all of the grinding marks on every one of the optics all the way down. Yeah. Water is not our friend. Not when it comes to, electronics and whatnot. But,
Nope.
You think about that. Almost all of your smartphones now are fairly water resistant. They're not water resistant enough to go dunking them like that, but if you drop them, or spray them or whatever, chances are they'll survive. Cameras, same thing now. GPSRs, usually, same kind of conditions. And it wasn't that long ago that if you got them wet at all, they'd totally die. So we've come so far with all of the electronics for geocaching that I don't have a worry about carrying the smartphone with me anymore. Granted, I still would rather have it in some kind of case. I'm not a fan of like the OtterBox cases, but there's a lot of cases that will give you an awful lot of protection without giving it the bulk, and just don't cost all that much, really.
Yeah. Well, and again, in favor of the GPSR, not so long ago, did a hike to a rarely found geocache that required a 120-meter swim at the end to actually get to ground zero through a lake. And the GPSR, the eTrex 30X, dipped into the water a few times by accident as I was swimming, but it's totally fine. I mean, the thing is rubberized and designed to get wet, and the number of times we've been hiking in absolute pouring rain, never had a problem. So,
but well, in the rain, you're going to have problems with any touchscreen. I'll say that too.
Sure, touchscreen, but that's why I use the eTrex 30X.
Exactly, and this is one of the other great things about having the GPSR is if you're going to be in any kind of wet conditions, the GPSR without the touchscreen, so no Oregon 650s, are going to be your best friend because they will not have the problem of the false touches and stuff. But on the seals and everything, if you have the GPS for any length of time, If you get dust into the doors for those interchangeable batteries, guess what? All bets are off. So make sure that before you go out on those wet adventures, that you're checking those seals and make sure that they're good. My niece had a similar kind of thing. She had one of the cases that had a little piece of dust in it. When she was in Hawaii, first day, she went swimming and her phone got hosed because of a little piece of dust in the seal that she couldn't find. But I do like having the dry bag for the phone. And even though my phone is technically waterproof, I always put it in the dry bag if I'm going caching in the rain or whatever. Yep. They're like $5-6. Again, don't really trust it to do it, but it's nice to have that little bit of extra protection, and you can always use a sandwich bag in an emergency.
Yeah.
And we just keep talking. Jennifer, I really wanted to get into some of the discussion of how, as I remember you had talked about it before, you were finding that the smartphone actually helped you with the puzzle caches. But since we're over an hour now, we'll have to save that for another show.
Very good.
Thank you very much for joining us and sharing all of that insight. And Jennifer, where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at geocachingpuzzleoftheday.blogspot.com. Still going in the 6th or 7th year of the thing. The puzzle every day. And if anybody's got any interesting, fun, unique, clever puzzles, feel free to send them along to me. I love to share them with other people, and makes my job a lot easier if people point me in the right direction for some good ones.
And of course, check out all of our previous shows that you've been on talking about puzzle caches. And we promise that you'll be back for more discussions about puzzle caches, because everyone always wants to know more about puzzle caches.
I look forward to it.
And then Land Monkey, thanks so much for joining us tonight and giving us a lot more insight in the stead of Chris of the Northwest. That just doesn't work as well as Bad Cop.
It's not as dramatic.
No. And of course, they can find you on Caching in the Northwest, but where else can they find you?
They can find me on Caching in the Northwest every Thursday about 2 hours after we wrap up here. But you can also find us at follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. It's at LandMonkeyGC. That's the easiest place to find us. But if you want to check out our videos, why don't you head on over to YouTube and just search Land Monkey, LANMONKEY on YouTube, and you'll find well over 100 videos of us doing crazy extreme geocaching adventures and sharing them with you.
Awesome. And I want to thank all of our patrons, past and present, for your support. We've had another couple of patrons who had to cancel their support of the show this month. We really appreciate them for all of their financial support. And we know that most of you who can't contribute financially are still supporting the show in spirit, if nothing else. But we really do appreciate all of that support, including all of the reviews, the referrals to friends, the contributions in the way of your feedback. But if you are a patron, we really appreciate that financial support, because that's what helps keep the lights on and the shows coming to you. Plus, if you can do it, you get some of that bonus material, including the picks and extra shows. Now, next week for show 300, usually those randomized shows are patron-only shows, but we're going to still post to the patron site, but it is going to be available to everyone. So if you haven't had the chance to go to Patreon and check out what's up there, there is a bunch of stuff for everyone to check out, including a lot of the stuff that goes to patrons first. But next week for sure, head over there and check that out. Speaking of next week, though, Land Monkey, we got a bunch of shows coming up.
Daryl, you have been hard at work as always, lining up just some great shows. It looks like for the next couple of weeks, though, you might have started to run low on guests, because taking a look here. September 28th, GeoGearHeads number 300. That's amazing. Dude, congratulations.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Quite the landmark.
Yeah, it is. Randomize Lixie. I'm gonna have fun with that one. So that show is going to have Mark of the O Beep Geocaching podcast. I'm looking forward to hearing Mark again. Shermanator
And I
18.
might add, he's one of our first patrons. He helped get the patron program going.
Awesome. Way to go, Mark. Shermanator 18 will also be on that podcast. And myself, I'll be coming back next week to share in that. I'm really looking forward to being on with those folks. So that's September 28th. It's a randomize. October 5th, GeoGearHeads 301 is the Northwest Coup. It's going to be chaos. Daryl has no idea what's going to happen to his podcast. He may not make it past 301 episodes.
Yeah, 301 might be the end of the show.
It may be. So make sure you tune in for the Northwest Coup of GeoGearHeads on October 5th. October 12th, episode 302 is Trapes. That's with Patient Rocks and Darren from Trapes. And October 19th on episode 303, we're going to talk about road caching. Once again, wow, there's been a lot of road caching episodes. That's number 14, I think that is.
Yep.
Am I reading my Roman numerals correctly? Nice. Okay.
You are.
And the guest for that episode with Chris and Daryl is going to be Monkey Brad. And anybody with monkey in their caching name is all right by me.
Well, and you might remember the Captain Rodney's trackables.
Yeah.
He's one of the guys behind that. He was traveling the country giving away those trackables. And that's one of the big things we're going to be talking with him about on that road caching show.
Nice. I want to hear that one.
So check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Soffenauer and Daryl Wadberg. This show is copyright 2017 by Daryl Wadberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with the Cachemaniacs.